Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome. We have a special guest this morning, Mr. Nick Patti. Welcome to the building, sir.
Good to be here. Thanks
oh, my goodness. I'll tell you what, this guy walks in, every time he walks into a room, they say you either brighten a room or you dim a room. And ladies and gentlemen, I'll tell you what, our guest today, he brightens every room that he's in. So, Nick Patti, thank you so much for being here, my man.
Thank you. Kind words. Excited to be here.
True story.
Be back in the building.
Back at the studio.
Always fun, man. Always fun.
Well, I'll give some background here. This is an exciting time at Urban Young. It's an exciting time for Nick. We have been on a journey for the past couple years, maybe, through this process. And the idea of entrepreneurship, the idea of partnership, the idea of breaking into new markets, the idea of what Jupe life really means. Has all details have converged to create an opportunity for not only Mr. Patti, but for us here at Urban Young to kind of partner and create an experience, an Urban Young experience down in Jupiter. And what was that, July 10th? We were just talking offline? Yeah. So yeah, man. So, we've known Nick for a very long time and obviously family friends, and we go way back, and a lot of sports intertwined with just life and family, and to have an opportunity for Nick to open an agency under the Urban Young brand and for us to support and kind of relive those early days through him is beyond exciting. And he's not, it's beyond self-evident that you are absolutely 100% the guy. And just in the short time that we've had together, I know we'll get into it today, but it's been amazing to watch just somebody take initiative and do the thing before you even know what the thing is. So with that, man, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for taking a leap of faith in this new chapter of your life, and we'll get into some of that today, man. But thanks for stopping in.
Yeah, it's off to a great start, and everything you just said, I'll reiterate. It's been pretty cool to have all that sort of proven that we're doing the right things with the right people. All the discussions we had prior to and why you're doing it, what you're doing, jumping into something completely new, but not with new people, but people that you're comfortable with in a completely new role. Right. So we've been friends forever. We played sports. We've had, families. So you're very comfortable, but you've never done this together, you know? So it's a completely new chapter with similar faces. So, which for me, I get so much joy out of with that, because it's like, meeting new people, doing things with new people is fantastic, but having someone that, a bunch of people you care about doing it together is even more special. So it's really cool.
No doubt. Yeah. Isn't that the truth? I think we were at a dinner this week. We were out in Dallas. I think we were Austin and then Dallas. And it was one of the dinners, just looked at each other and said, man, this journey doesn't mean anything unless you're doing it with somebody that you want to hang out with. It's like
so true. We saw quite a contrast, I feel like, right?
Yeah, just depending on, who we were meeting with and what we were doing. And it's like, what's the filter of if you want to do business with somebody? For us, the filter is, can we have a good time together and hang out, and do we enjoy each other's company, man? And so every time we get together, it's just a great, reminder of why this is so special. So, but man,
appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and for the listeners at home that obviously don't know you, one of the big, things that Rod Taylor and I have been so impressed with is you don't come from an insurance background. You have some entrepreneurship in your family and in your blood. But as far as, your past experience and where you come from, this is a completely foreign thing. And in just short, 3 months now of, a month of training, month and a half, and then right into the deep end, already seeing some significant results, already performing at a really high level. That's no stranger for you and your background. We'll get into that today, but, maybe touch on kind of, our background a little bit, where you come from, and then what you did in your previous career before you took the step and opened an agency.
Sure. Yeah. So coming out of college, graduating from UCF, I made the leap down to Jupiter to do medical sales. So sort of on the back end of my college career, just sort of searching for what you want to do. You're not quite sure. I didn't have a job circled outside of athletics that I felt was my next calling, but I knew that I wanted to do something that would at least set me up to be in an entrepreneurial mindset. So that drove me into medical sales. That I worked for Arthrex and sold devices, and so a lot of sports medicine. So similar world with a lot of like-minded people. took me to Jupiter, which we love, and maybe that was the biggest blessing of it all, that it, got us, my wife and I, to a place where, we love to live now. And I loved that. It was such a great experience for me early on to do out of school and get your feet wet. And, you're around a lot of brilliant minds. You're in an industry that's, technically difficult. And so, there's a lot to learn, a lot of information, a lot of which you can't learn right away because it's so much, and not only the information of the job, but, that's your first job. You're now a professional. You're out of school. You're responsible for a lot of things, and you're in a new place. And so it was really good for me from that aspect. I felt like there was a lot of growth. And then you just, growing up, my dad was always a pretty entrepreneurial guy. He's had, a million different businesses and ways that he's done things. And, you just sort of grow a liking to that, and you're comfortable with that. And for whatever reason, I felt myself be in that same situation. So, you find yourself 5 years into doing medical sales, and you kind of, where's that avenue of what's next, and, we've talked about what that process has looked like and where's it going to be and how. And when you guys came along, we started talking about possibilities. It seemed like the perfect fit for a multitude of reasons. One, the industry. Two, who you're doing it with, what we just talked about. And three, just having an opportunity to build something that's yours and make it, what you want it, build it from the ground up. And, that's my biggest drive, I think, to the entrepreneurial mindset for me is the growth, the building, adding people, getting the right pieces in place, coaching people, whatever. So, and having an athletics background, I think that's where it comes from, the team atmosphere. So,
well, and you kind of came from that's a big passion of yours, the coaching side, right? I mean, because you talk about, I know we've talked offline about the fact of like, what did life look like after athletics? I think for a long time, you didn't think there was anything after athletics, right?
That was it, man. That was my identity, was in that. And, I sort of alluded to not knowing what was after athletics. I don't think it was because, I didn't have any direction or any passions or anything like that. I just always thought it would be in athletics up until the very end of that. And I specifically in coaching. I think I always had a big passion for that because there's such an opportunity to influence people at an optimal age, at a really important time in their life. On the college side, I was influenced tremendously, and I always just saw myself doing that because of the influence I had on, that coaches had on me. So, as the process went on, things just started to change, and you just feel, in your heart that you're moving away from that passion or whatever that may be, and you got to kind of redirect it. So that's what I experienced, and there wasn't, you can't really get walked through that process. Fortunately for me, I had some people that I could lean on that also went through it. Mm-hmm. One of which, probably most importantly, was Butchie Rowley, who is why I went down to Jupiter, and he offered me that chance. And, I called him coming out of school and just said, hey, this is what's happening. This is what I thought. I'm not sure what direction. I know you went through this process as an athlete. What do I do? Who should I call? Where should I look? And he gave me advice for 45 minutes and then said, I'll bring you down. If you want to move to Jupiter, come on down.
Hey, that's not why I called.
Right. Yeah. It's like, man, I promise I just needed advice. But he was extremely helpful, and ultimately ended up hiring me and was extremely helpful, not only in the transition prior to that, but the transition into that. And so major influence on me, and very grateful for that.
Yeah.
I think about a lot of your characteristics, and I hear that story, but I think it's important to provide a little color and, kind of fill the gap between where you mentioned your background in athletics. I think the listener would love to know what that journey looks like and how that's translated into qualities you bring to the business world, because I think they're very valid and very, very applicable.
Sure. Yeah. And, I think it's different for everybody, which is a struggle, I think, because everybody, you're moving away from different things that you think were strengths for you. And I think the biggest challenge for me was taking those things that years and years and years you go through that were your strengths and made you who you are and made you successful, and then you have to redirect those. But people just assume that they go with you automatically, that you just start doing medical sales and then you still have the same disciplines, the same, all that. But it's a different place, right? So you have to learn to redirect those. So for me, that was the challenge, if you will, was, putting a new face on those, putting a new plan, and kind of refining how I could use those in a different arena. So, I think for me, and I hope I'm answering your question kind of in the right direction, but for me, it's taking like the disciplines of how you do things, the attention to detail, being on time, nothing is too small of a detail, and kind of finding a way, because those things are all set out for you perfectly in athletics. Someone's telling you how to do those, when to do those, where to go. When you leave that environment, you no longer have that. No one's telling you what time to watch film. No one's telling you what time lunch is. No one's telling you what time weights are. If you want to have those same disciplines that make you great, you have to now find when and where and how those things are. On top of that, no one's telling you if you're doing a good job. And I think as an athlete, you're constantly being critiqued. You're constantly being coached, and you lose that when you walk away from it. So you're kind of craving, we've talked about it a ton, you're craving a film session of someone telling me like, dude, you're not doing this right. This is not how it goes, and you almost want to say like, man, who's willing to coach me, right? And so as an athlete, you're in a whole different mindset. You don't appreciate it when you're in there as much, but I left thinking, man, what I would do for just a 30-minute film session on my life. So ultimately, those people do show themselves if you're willing to look and ask for it. So, but you have to. They don't just. I think my biggest thing is those attributes that make college athletes special don't just translate. They don't just follow you. You have to find that new face of where they belong.
Yeah, I love that. And also to catch up. So you went out to Boise. Top quarterback in the country, go out to Boise State. Were you there for 2 or 3 years?
I was there for 2 seasons.
2 seasons, because you went out in spring early, so a little longer.
And 3 calendar years, 2 seasons.
Then also transferred back to UCF and finished your career there playing quarterback and receiver. But
Go Knights.
Go Knights. Shameless plug. And I think one of the parts that I'd love to pick your brain on and expand upon, and it's kind of the story of why you came back to Orlando, was you've had a couple different coaching staffs. Did you have 3 head coaches? I
had 3 head coaches, 5 if you count the interim head coaches.
Right. So this is what amazes me.
Wow.
Right. So one of the philosophies I hold from athletics, just from an athletic director, I had a few coaching staffs as well in my time, is just, you really start to appreciate good leadership when you've had bad leadership. And it's like, so I know you probably had both. You don't need to call names on the bad, sure. but and there's different versions you can certainly pull from every experience and every coach. But your relationship with, you call him Coach Pete, it's Chris Peterson out in Boise State. He was there for a long time. Went on to Washington, is semi-retired right now on TV. Yeah. Tell us about him. Tell us about kind of how you guys connected and how that's kind of shaped your path as a leader.
Sure. Yeah. So ultimately, I talked about being really influenced early on in my, athletics career. And I had some great high school coaches and mentors outside that weren't just my coaches in high school that certainly influenced me. But he grabbed me at a young age and altered the way that I thought. He was a really captivating being for me because he was into the direction. He has a philosophy with his players that it's so much bigger than the game, right? So when I was being recruited, I was fortunate enough to be recruited by a lot of coaches and talk to a lot of coaches, go through this process, the same process a bunch of times. And everybody has their wrinkle, but most people, it's the same pitch and it's very similar. They have their facilities are different or their jerseys are different or, they're a little more successful, whatever. He was different from the very get-go. He spoke to you different as a young man. He talked about different things. He was worried about different things to get to know you in a different way. He calls them OKGs, is what he calls the perfect guy that fits into their system. And I think what's special about what I loved is it just seemed like they were doing things on a global level different because of little things like that. Whether, he wasn't willing to go after just any kid because they were a 5-star or anything like that. And he didn't really care about it. I remember the day that he offered me, he mentioned that because and he wasn't a cocky guy, but he really believed that what they were doing was working and people were watching. He told me, because we're going to offer you, you're going to get calls from a lot of different schools now, because that's just what they do. When they would offer a kid that was a diamond in the rough, the offers would follow. And he was big on, before that happens, look for these things. Make your decision on what you're looking for instead of just having a million different schools, jumping in. And so that ultimately, a lot of his philosophies have translated to me, and he was such a captivating individual because I think on the philosophical side, he was more in depth than the other staffs. He was big on like attention to detail. He always had a notebook, write everything down, things like writing crystallizes your thinking. It's in your head, but put it on paper and it's very real. And, it's things like that over and over, just kind of gravitate. And so he leaves, and I just saw myself in a situation where, you're going to start from scratch, and those guys were gone. There's a big transition happening, and ultimately decided to come back home to Orlando and be closer to family and all that stuff. So he had a huge impact on me, still does, and very grateful for that.
Yeah, wow. It triggers a few thoughts. The OKG, so it's our kind of guy.
Our kind of guy.
So I even think about, that's in a recruiting landscape for college athletics where you're looking at high school kids, you're looking at college transfers, and you're trying to find. But I just pull so many nuggets from that, right? Like, even as a business owner, as a recruiter, as a team lead, do you have an our kind of guy mindset? Have you defined with clarity on what that looks like, rather than just going after the shiny object? Like, yeah, I think that person may work, or yeah, they're pretty talented. They have a college degree, or they have a business degree, or in the recruiting landscape, they have a bunch of stars next to their name, so we'll just assume that they're a good fit. Right. Somebody else thought they were talented. So, I borrow so much from that from a recruiting standpoint on the coaching staff side, but then also for him to challenge you to say, hey, why don't you put together your own version of like what you're looking for is our kind of school, right? What do you want your experience to look like? And then that's just super effective too, because
I think that was his mindset, not to cut you off, but he wanted you to buy into them being what you wanted as an OKG as much as he wants you to be that, right? Because if ultimately you don't buy into that,
right,
you weren't willing to commit to what they were doing. Hey, if you don't want to do these things, that's okay, but he didn't want those guys encroaching because, I think he was big on every time you add a piece or lose a piece, it changes, right? And it's not a cocky thing, but on the culture standpoint, it's like every time you allow another person in, you compromise a little bit, possibly, right? There's another chink in the armor that can possibly bend on what you're trying to do. So it was even more important on the front end to him to get that figured out. And, and just for different reasons, right? It's like, he'd ask you so many questions about your family or on the weekends, and he was picking from that. It's like ultimately you could go on someone's Facebook and find out a little bit deeper of what they are, or their Instagram, whatever, and you can find out a little bit more as opposed to what people will tell you. He was good at doing that in a conversation, and it wasn't to manipulate or anything like that. It was just very important that those basic foundations were there. Yeah, and I do think it translates.
I feel like that makes you so much credible as a business owner, an entrepreneur, a coach, to have so much respect for your coach, right? For so much respect for your journey of being coached. I've always enjoyed our conversations centered around your, I guess you call it an affinity for Coach Pete, right? I mean, it's just you've always spoken to him in such high regard, which is a cool story. But to see that bridge into you as a business owner and an entrepreneur, to me, it just gives you worlds of credibility about having earned the right to now be a coach for someone, right? Sure. You're coachable, right? And now you're in a position to teach and coach. To me, it's just like such a perfect storm.
Yeah,
such a perfect storm.
Absolutely.
And from a humility standpoint, one last thought, it shows such humility on your part to be able to sit here now, having had a successful career and transferred away back home, to still hold him in such high regard. Sure. I have a ton of respect for him, man. I love hearing about the Coach Pete stories, and to me, it's just so transferable.
Such a special guy, and I think you gain a lot more respect, and sort of to your point, the initial question, for how great he was when you experience other ways of doing things. Mm-hmm. So then you transfer, and we were successful, and I learned a ton of things from both staffs. I learned a ton of things from my entire experience, but ultimately, one thing that was highlighted for me is that you have just as good of an opportunity to learn things from the way you don't want to do certain things as you do from someone that's teaching you how to do things well. And so many people, I think, just say, man, I would never do things like that. I don't even want to learn from that person, or I disagree with them, so I'm just going to shut it out. And there's just as good of an opportunity there to learn how to not do it. But I think human nature is, man, like they're not a good leader, I'm not going to follow them. It's like, well, you don't have to follow them, but you should pay attention because there's something there, you know, that obviously you want to learn in a different capacity, but it's strong. So I think that's one of the things that it was big on the second stint, you know, that you learn.
Yeah, I think about like in our business of just, you know, like producers, right? You know, you're going after the producers get the biggest book,
Right.
You know, get the most revenue, and I think about those as the 5 stars. But you know, we talk about culture fit all the time. What a threat to bring anyone into the organization that's not going to, you know, make it stronger, no matter what type of 5 stars, 4 stars, all that stuff that you have accolades. Because at the end of the day, right, if you're, you know, you have the players coach and then you have the coach, right? Yeah. You know, and there's different philosophies on that. But I love the old school coach's coach, right? That's about the team, you know, and especially in such a team sport like that. And I don't think that's a lost art, but at the same time, you love to hear that. Just because we all need role models. Like I know I can go back in my Rolodex of people that I model. We all model different people, whether subconscious or, you know, consciously. And I think hopefully that never changes. We're always looking for stuff like that. But to have such a unique, strong role model to always to like pull back from, if you're ever in a situation, you're like, all right, well, how would this person handle this, right? And then be able to put your own spin on it. But it's so invaluable because it's a never-ending battle of leadership, right? You're dealing with people. The people are the weirdest units on the planet, right? It's very hard to anticipate one person's behavior. It's very easy to anticipate a large group of people's behavior. So to be able to have situational awareness based on personality traits and characteristics and philosophy, you called it, is a pretty cool transferable, you know, skill.
You just said situational awareness, and I've never used that phrase in business, but that's such a great transferable skill from athletics because you can't map out every single, this is the way that this is going to happen, that defender's going to do this at this time, right? As much as you want to get prepared, you still have to allow for the game to be played and anticipate. And then another thing I was thinking about too with your story about, you know, your credit to Nick being so coachable. I agree, right? A ton. But I also look at your journey, and I think why you are and why you're such and will be and continue to be such an effective leader. And when I say leader, I don't even mean in the same. I just mean like when you're in a room, right? When you're in a setting, we've been buddies for a long time, right? People just gravitate, right? People want to be around. There's an energy, right? There's this unsaid trust, all that stuff, but. A couple of things that you mentioned, the ability to be coachable translate into your ability to be probably an effective coach. And so you allowing mentorship to come into your life and be aware of it at different points, I think is really cool how that's influenced. Like you mentioned a couple of things with your time in high school, obviously you had some mentors, but then get out of school, reaching out to Butch Rowley, who's, you know, a total stud, ton of respect for him, mutual friend, but you allowed him to come into your life, right? And you kind of followed his direction, leaned on him, and learned a ton from him. That took you down to Jupiter, where you've found this love for this area, and then now translating, to Urban Young, right? You come here and you're asking to be coached, right? And being able to take in that different level of influence at different points, and then allowing it to continue to define ultimately, hey, what is Nick Patti? Okay, I'd probably do things a little different on every stop of the way. Right. But you don't get that because it's almost like you're in the back. You're allowing yourself to be coached, and you're just adding to the Rolodex. So it's cool to watch.
I think too, it's like I think any effective coach. I use the word coach because I'm just so comfortable with that. Right in my mind, that's what any business owner, leader, whatever. Any good leader, I feel that I've ever been around has been just craving information. Because that when they have an opportunity to influence somebody else, they want to have that in their Rolodex. They want to have that in their holster. Not because, and they want to just make themselves better, not because they feel like they can influence the thousands, but when they get that one opportunity, you know, that they can be better for the collective, you know, and that's certainly something that I took from Coach Pete, Coach Frost the same way at UCF. But yeah, on a molecular level, just getting better little by little. I think any good leader I've ever been around just wants as much information as possible, good or bad, because then it ultimately shapes, how you can provide for others. You guys all do an awesome job of that, just craving information, reading books, just having as much information at your disposal. You guys looking at the way other people are doing things, again, good or bad. I think you guys all do a really good job of that, and I always love being around it.
So I'm realizing this as we're sitting here. I'm sitting with 3 athletes who played at a high level that at some point along the way realized that they were going to need to pivot and get into business at some point. So, and I know each of one of your stories. So number one, I'll ask all 3 of you. Number one, was that moment a one-time like epiphany, or was it a slow bleed and you figured it out? That's my first question. Then number 2, is that a depressing thing? Is that an exciting thing? Is that an aha? Is there relief involved with that? What's that feeling like? And then 3, when you figure out what's next, like what's the first thing you did? Like what's the first action step that you go, okay, now what?
Yeah, man, I'll take the lead on that one. I think it was a progression of different intensity of that feeling like this is not going to last forever at different points. Part of that was, you get to college. For me, I was at UCF basketball and stuff, and I kind of felt like in the first game of pickup, like, I might have to go to class. Just because the play's so elevated from what you're used to, and then for me, I got to a point where you're like, and actually I can play with these guys, and I actually think I could be pretty good here. But I feel like I had the benefit to where once my freshman year ended, I knew I wasn't going to play professionally. I'm sure I could at some capacity somewhere, but it was my deficits or the level. I just wasn't, there wasn't a level of belief, nor was I willing to do what it takes to do that. And for some reason, subconsciously, and I would never have been able to articulate at the time, but subconsciously, I was like, you know what, though? This is a cool experience, and I'm going to give it everything I have to honor this experience. But I had no belief that I was going to play in the NBA, right? I thought maybe there's a plan, maybe I'll play overseas. Maybe I'll try to make some money. And then as my career progressed, I have this feeling like I took my body as far as it could. I probably went like 3 years past my capacity. And like God's up there, like he's still playing. Like, that's unbelievable. And so my senior year, I was just so beat up. So when you talk about relief, man, I was like, you're telling me I don't have to run another sprint? Like, whatever, we're insurance? Yeah, whatever you want to do, man. As long as I'm, I remember getting out of bed just being like aching and getting to the training room an hour early just to like shoot around. And at that point, it was just, for me, that was like the nail in the coffin. But if that makes any sense. And I'll expand upon what Nick said. I think, it's an interesting transition. For me, it was challenging too, because and I never was able to articulate it in the way that you did. But you're just looking for that next scoreboard. You're looking for that next, are we winning? Are we losing? When you play a sport, it's so objective. At the end of the day, at the end of the practice, at the end of the competitive drill, whether you won or lost. And if you won, there's things you can work on. If you lost, there's more things to work on. And so transitioning to the business world, yes, there are those things, but it's not the same environment that is that pressurized and objective and competitive. And you almost have to make your own games within the game. And I found that to be a tough transition in the early years, where I was craving the very similar thing, like, man, just tell me if I'm doing a good job, and I'm hard on me, so you can be hard on me, and, let's go fast and that kind of stuff. So
very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
You're up.
I'll say this. If I had known then what I now know, it would have been a way different transition. Back then, it was kind of a gut punch to just have to raise your hand and say, I'm just not good enough to play golf for a living. Golf was my sport. Had a lot of cool experiences, learned a lot. I would even go out on a limb and say that I don't think there were many guys out there that worked harder, but I had to make up for something. And I think, the only way I could do it was just spend more time than anybody else working on it. But something neat happened when I hung up the idea of playing for a living. I had the opportunity to caddy on the PGA Tour, and man, I wish that our order had been flipped, because being around the best players in the world and seeing them day in and day out, when you watch golf on TV, you're seeing the guys that are just on, right? What you're not seeing, so let's call that the top 20 or 30 guys in any given week. Well, there's, 40 to 80 other guys that make a cut each week that are pretty human, right? And that perspective was cool, and I learned a lot, and I was able to enjoy that part of my golf career. But when I made the decision to hang up golf altogether, I moved into medical sales. And what I think about now is how back then I prided myself on, and I was very aware of my work ethic. So that transition really helped me in healthcare sales when I first got started, because I had all kinds of deficits there. Didn't know healthcare, didn't know which area. I mean, I was in a bunch of different areas of healthcare sales. And when I entered those roles, I didn't know anything about any of those industries. So I had to make it up by just reps. I had to make it up by just dumb effort. So to answer your question, that was a tough day to say, hey man, I'm not good enough to play this sport for a living. But like I said, and the difference now is that we've discovered and realized the importance of personal development. Chasing golf the way I did back in those, 99 to 98 to 2001, I probably had a pretty bad attitude. Not probably, I did. And the thing that's cool is when we started working together, I mean, the first thing we learned about was personal development. So not only did my work ethic, which was already benefiting me, help me, but then when you add mindset, you talked about mindset. When you add mindset in and you're on a path of personal development, and it's a game changer. So I think to myself, if I had personal development back then, and potentially if the roles would have been reversed, I might have had a little better chance. The truth is, I still wouldn't have been good enough, but I think the outcomes would have been a little bit different.
Was it an event? Did you play an event and get done and have this kind of realization, or was it multiple events? Can you remember the day?
I have a funny story about that, and I'll leave names out of it, but I was standing on a putting green one morning, and I heard a couple guys talking, a couple players in the tournament talking, and they said, if there was ever a day that somebody could break 60, this is it. And I thought to myself, kind of like you playing your first game of pickup, I better go to class. I'm thinking, wow.
I'm not breaking 60.
This is the day.
Wait, are they kidding?
Was this a big name?
He played. I think he played the tour for a year or two.
Eldrick?
He was a little bit older now. Eldrick, unfortunately, I mean, that was kind of a daily thing for him. But no, it was. And I think they wound up. I think one of those guys wound up shooting 61 or 62 in that given event.
Jeez.
And I just thought to myself, wow,
There are levels.
yeah. I mean, it's just dumb. I mean,
Wow.
What about you, Nick? Was there a moment? Was it what?
No, there wasn't one moment. No, it was a slower bleed for me, I think. I mean, it wasn't a long-term thing. I just, like I said, I always kind of viewed whether I was done playing or not, I was going to coach or GA or, broadcasting was another avenue. So I never really saw I knew the pivot was coming, but the getting out of athletics in a whole was the slow bleed to where it's like, hold on, maybe that avenue's not going to be there, right? Because even going to GA after you're playing or jumping into coaching, whatever it may be, you're going to be done playing. So I knew that was going to be done, but it was the transition out completely. That was the slow bleed.
Right.
And there was not one thing that happened that I said, maybe I don't want to. The struggle for me, the overwhelming feeling that I had inside is that I always wanted to do that. I always saw myself, and when you talk about Coach Pete, and man, it's like, man, Jonathan Smith, when I was early, was my quarterback coach. He had an unbelievable impact on me. He gave me the 4 agreements when I was really young, And so it was like, man, I'm going to be giving away the opportunity to impact possibly like they did, right? So that was the struggle for me. But then you start to shift and you start to tell yourself, well, maybe I can do that in something else, and just shift that focus. And for me, I think it was the thought of my identity was always in sport. My identity was always as Nick plays football, the football player. Nick went to Boise State and played. Nick went to UCF and played. Still somewhat is. But, you know, I wanted to sort of shift that on my own terms, you know. And for whatever that is, I don't shy away from the fact of telling people I wanted to prove that I could do something else in football. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. At least I don't view it that way. You know, because I was somewhat successful in it, and, you know, there was a path there that was a pretty easy path to jump in and have an opportunity to do something for a long time. And I just sort of said to myself, at some point, I want to do something different, you know, and I want to be in the business world. You know, my dad was, you see your dad, successful business guy for a long time. You see a lot of his, you know, I was advantageously exposed to a lot of successful business people growing up. And I think that might have lit the fire a little bit to say I want to do that. And so my transition was a little different in the fact that I sort of knew I was going to be done playing. It was the walking away from the game, coaching, and, you know, having that be behind me. That was the struggle. And ultimately I made a decision. I think the moment came when I still had a year to play. And like you said, you want to honor that opportunity. You want to honor that experience. And I certainly feel like I did. I didn't waste one thing. My senior year was successful. I, you know, had a great year, had a lot of fun. But I, going into my senior year, knew that I was going to pivot and go and leave sport after that. And that's when I reached out, not only to Butch, but to a you know, bifold of people, 10 people that my dad gave me the advice to say, hey, reach out to these people. And if you know, you don't know what you want to do, put 10 names down and call them and just ask them, see what they got for you. And I did that, and it worked out for me, but I still had a year left. And that's when Butch ultimately said, you know, this is here for you. If you want it, play. You got one more year, give it all you got. And he knew that mindset, you know, and he was helpful for that whole year. So it was a battle, you know, and I think that was a struggle ahead of it, but, you know, after the fact was the big battle for me, you know, when you finally even decide to make that decision and you're burning the boats and you're going. So personally, my battle came after the fact. It wasn't up front. I was pretty passionate about the decision I made. I was pretty eager and set on it. My battle was after.
Saturdays looked a little different.
A little bit different.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. I don't know if you remember, but this is before this part of the office. You actually came here.
I did
in that same time frame, and it was fun conversations. But that's crazy full circle when you think about how long ago that was. Just right down the hall in the office, back when the wall was up, and
That's cool.
I do remember that.
5-6 years ago now.
That's really cool.
Crazy.
Well, I don't know where I got it, but somebody had said business is my sport, and I subscribe to that. I haven't had the privilege to play at the level of you guys do, but I consider business to be my sport. I love it. I consider it to be the ultimate sport. But I don't want to continue to stay on the athletics, but I think it's really cool because I'm fascinated with it. There's a lot of kids that are playing sports right now, right? Whether they're in college athletics or they're coming out of high school, and you know, they have that, you know, they have this path, but a lot of people face this issue, right? Like, or this realization, and they come to this point, you know, like what if you could sum it up in one quick piece of advice, what would be one piece of advice that you would give the kid who is coming to the realization that there's life after sports, and that they could be super passionate about it, they could be freaked out by it, they could be relieved by it, but there's this next step that they really haven't given much thought to, and they don't know where to start. What would be your advice to them?
I mean, I borrow from what your dad told you. Go get around people that, you know, have been quote unquote successful in different areas of life, and just kind of borrow from their experience and leverage their experience, and skip ahead a little bit, you know, and then also just get busy, paying some rent. You know, what success is rented, and rent's due every day, and you're starting over, right? I think that's the part in sports. I don't know if you'd relate to, but for me, it's like you've been playing basketball all your life. At some level, you've had success, your identity's within it. And so to lose that, and now for me, you know, to transition into insurance, like no no one cares about your basketball. In my mind, it's like, it doesn't matter what you did then. You're now proving it on a different level. So I would just say get busy doing that, and just get in the mix of it. Because and another thing too that I think is underrated about athletics, but any team, is like in athletics, if you commit to being a good teammate, if you commit to like honoring the experience, I've been amazed at how those relationships have transitioned now, being 10, 12 years removed. That, and if I called any of those guys I played with, or I called any of those coaches that I built relationships with, whether it be for a job or for an opportunity, for an introduction, they'd be happy to oblige, because I felt like I honored that experience. So
that's a good point.
So whatever phase you're in, honor that experience, because those relationships will well outlast that phase of life. And,
Right.
I wish I would have had more direction in that regard, even though I felt like I did an okay job at it.
Other than the memories, that's really what you take with you, is the relationships. Yep. And those are the things that pay you, I think, exponentially over the years of your life. That's really good. For me, I think my one thing would be that it's okay. I think a lot of people struggle with like, man, how do I stop? And I even lean more towards the young kid maybe in high school that doesn't know if sports is for them. I have a brother that at a young age with all athletic siblings said, this is not my thing. This is not for me. And had he not, it would have been the worst decision he ever made because he has a passion and a gift that he went and followed. And it's, he's the most talented person in our family because he went and followed that feeling, and it was okay to him. I'm going to do this, And I think it's a struggle for a lot of kids. Like maybe football's not for you, maybe basketball, maybe baseball, maybe you're not good enough. That's okay. Don't waste any time thinking that it isn't okay. Go find what that is. Go pour yourself into it and go find your mentor in something else. I think sports has a way, and it's great for young people. It's awesome. I think it pays dividends for young people to be in sport. And obviously, the overwhelming majority of people don't make it to the next level, so there's a fortunate there, but the reality is that high school is the end of it. Right. And so spend your time investing in the people long term. If it's hard to say like, hey, you're probably not going to make it, so you should, I don't mean it in that regard. I mean, I'm speaking to the person that is struggling with thinking, is this me or not? What's next?
But that's what the numbers say. So this is fascinating, because I think it's a good tangent when you're talking about like how we face our careers. The numbers say, like the NBA, there's the least amount of roster spots out of any other sport, I believe, right? There's, 30-something teams, 15 guys on a roster. You do the math. It's like a couple hundred people in the world that play in that league. But as a kid, you all start out saying, the NBA, the NBA, and the NBA. And then there's some reality that it's going to end. But that doesn't mean that you can't honor the experience. Right. Because the pivot that I'm coming to in my head is that it's not just about the result of the experience. It's about who you're becoming on the journey. And it's the same with your career or your personal development. Is to say the goal is not to, yes, maybe the goal for some is to play in the NBA. We've had friends that are playing. You have a great buddy that's playing in the NFL. But those are the one-offs, man. How many guys have you played with that aren't doing that? 99%, right? So what are all those guys
0.9,
doing, right? So hopefully the ones that were able to take a lot from it and then put it into somebody else, because it's this never-ending experience that you can find ways to make it translate.
So good. Yeah, very good.
Good thoughts. ROD?
The one thing I think about the transferable skill that you'd want to tell the kid that was a good college player, or good high school player, went to college, played and was great in college, but that was going to be the end of the road. My feeling is, especially now having the business perspective, is knowing the importance of being coachable. You clearly had to be coachable to be at a high level in your previous life. Yep. So I just think, simply enough, just make sure that you remain coachable, right? It's like if you know sport and you're coming into business, you don't know business. So spare me what you know. Sit back, listen, ask good questions, and
get some reps up.
Get some reps up. But I think I do think that if you excelled at a high level and you're used to that, I think that improves your chances of excelling at the next thing. If it's business, great. but I don't believe it comes without being coachable.
Yeah, there's this certain process of achievement, right? And it's kind of this universal transferable deal, right? There's a lot of failure, there's a lot of challenge, there's a lot of frustration, there's a lot of reps, there's a lot of stuff that most people don't see. There's a lot of friction involved, and then you break through. Right. And then you get this feeling of, wow, I did it. And then you grow self-confidence from that. And then you go to the next level and you do it all over and all over. And once you understand that process, it's kind of fun, because now you can deal with any challenge that comes your way. And you're kind of like, okay, I don't know what this is, but I know what this is, right? I've dealt with this before. I can go back to the bank of experiences and say, this is new, but the process is not new, right? I've been here before.
Yeah.
Which I think is really cool. So those transferable skills is totally a cool deal.
You just reminded me of something. It's like you were talking about a few hundred guys playing in the NBA, right? It's like 144 guys tee it up each week on the PGA Tour out of tens of thousands that have talent. 144 guys get that. It's like, I mean,
that's unbelievable. Yeah.
That's.
I'm not one of them. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. To expand on that, and that's where I love that point, because it's like the transferable skills are the things that you're going to take with you, and you articulated it maybe better than I could. You're going to take them with you, but it doesn't just the same things that make you successful don't just start happening, and to your point, it's like you can always go back to the bank, but you have to get that new experience to where it's like, okay, now I can use that here.
Well, and I love what you said about you have to set the framework, right? You're used to this framework. The processes are still the same, but you're like, okay, well, somebody has been setting the stage for me. Now I have to learn how to set the stage for myself, which I love that. I didn't think about that, but that's true. You go from discipline because you have to that doesn't mean you weren't disciplined. It just means that you were disciplined inside somebody else's box.
It creates the skill.
You kind of got to create your own box outside, and you know that now, because I mean, you're in Jupiter, you're away from the mothership, you're grinding every day by yourself, and you come up every once in a while. We come down there, but I mean, talk about have to be self-motivated. Talk about have to get up and create that framework for yourself. I mean, you're living that out right now.
Yeah.
I think that's such a good point though, Brett, because if you talk about transferable skills, I mean, there had to be plenty of times when you were just like, no one's looking. Am I going to put up shots, or am I going to go out to the bar? No one's looking. Am I going to the weight room? Am I going to go study film? Am I, and for me, the same thing. It's like, no, and I didn't even play a team sport, right? So it's like, harder. I mean, maybe not harder, but just different, right? Sure. It's like there was no accountability partner. It was like, no one's looking. The sun is still up. And what are you doing going back to the hotel?
What an invaluable skill right there, right? You figuring out a way to create that accountability when you were in an environment that had nothing but layers of accountability, right? Nowhere to hide. So,
and you know what I also love about sports too is that there's no promise, right? Just because you go hit balls after hours doesn't mean that you're going to win that weekend. Right. And it's the same with sports. Like, just because you showed up to the workouts doesn't mean you're going to earn the starting spot. Sure. There's somebody else that's doing that too. And I think sometimes that's lost in I don't know, call it an entitlement mentality. When you're used to sports, you're like, man, I've always been fighting for a spot. I've always been fighting to win. Yeah. So it doesn't make me uncomfortable to put in the work without the promise guaranteed. Right. So I think that translates as an entrepreneur, and I don't know if you can relate. It was like, I'm willing to put in the risk. I'm willing to put in the time for the opportunity to have a little success, for the opportunity to design a life, for the opportunity to build a team. Where what you want to hear if you don't have that mindset is like, tell me what to do, exactly how to do it, how long I have to do it, and then how big is the prize, right? And that's the disconnect for an entrepreneur, and something I want to give you mad props for, but I'd like you to expand upon. We talked a lot about the entrepreneur mindset. I want to get into what you're doing down in Jupiter, but something I've noticed from you at an early time frame is, man, you just have an ability to figure it out. You have this quiet confidence to say, I don't know it, man, but I know enough that I think I can figure it out, in a very humble way, but still that confidence translates. And so I think we've seen that in the first couple of months where you say, yeah, you're new to insurance, but sure doesn't feel like it. You're new to insurance, but you're certainly not new to building relationships. You're new to insurance, but you're not new to serving people at a high level and writing a really genuine, authentic thank you note. That's something you've always been really good at. We'll go on a trip, Nick and I, and he's probably done this for you guys. I guarantee it, where you'll get back from the trip and a couple days later you'll have a handwritten thank you note, and it'll tell you about a memory, and it's got a real picture of that trip or a memory. And I mean, you talk about standing out from the crowd. You're just like, dude, one, where did you learn that? Two, I got to borrow from that. But all those things seem to translate. So you look at that and say, that's awesome. But then also say, why insurance? You know, why Urban Young? And kind of how does that entrepreneurial spirit translate into this experience in a real tangible way?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think to the beginning of your question, kind of me, I'm the youngest of 4 kids, right? And I was always around older people. I was always around older athletes.
You were the younger brother.
I was the younger brother. Yeah, there's a brother in between me and my oldest brother. And, you know, obviously my sister's the oldest of us 4. So, you know, I always stem back to, you know, you and my older brother were good friends growing up. I saw you guys playing basketball. I saw you guys, you know, playing 2-on-2, wanted to play. You know, I wanted in the game. And I always had to, if I wanted to be in the group, you kind of have to push towards, you know, insert yourself, right? You're the youngest, dude. Like, no, you got to sit back, right? We're on a cruise. My dad kicks me off the volleyball team because there was a stranger that was a stronger player. And you know, they're gonna lose. So it's like, no, man.
Nick, we should talk about that. It seems like you still carry that.
Yeah, we talk about it probably once a month.
Son, you sit over here, love you, but you're a liability.
You're a liability, right? Yeah, sorry. I still got a medal, but it's like I didn't play. But no, it's like, you know, if you want to be in the game, you got to figure it out, and you have to produce. And you know, I've always kind of related back to being always having to sort of prove yourself, if you will. And I don't know. That's something I picked up from somebody else that did it for me, you know, and I liked, and I just, I think why Urban Young, I have a passion for being around people that can pour into me, or that are willing to pour into me, you know? And I think early on, you know, you highlight this as an opportunity for me to be in an entrepreneurial mindset, do my own thing, you know, have the freedoms that I kind of want to grow and long term. But short term, you know, I had some other opportunities to do that in other ways, and they're not always, you know, perfect world. You know, don't come with everything. You know, there's a lot of ways to be an entrepreneurial and just quit your job and start doing something. This came with so many other things for me because you guys are willing to pour into not only me but everyone around you. And you know, what I highlighted early on with you guys, and what people in the community highlight, is what you guys are willing, the light you guys are willing to shine. And I just have a passion to be involved in that, you know, and I have a passion to be, you know, part of that story. And, you know, I think too, I have obviously an affinity for the culture mindset, you know, and what you guys are building. And that's something that is my biggest driver to be in an entrepreneurial role, and hopefully grow the business enough to where we can start adding some pieces. And I want to share that because I really respect and appreciate what you guys do in that capacity. And I want to have, you know, my role in that, and growing that and spreading that. And then, you know, obviously insurance is a great business that very quickly you learn to like when you do it, you know, and you know, my whole life I've known a bunch of people that have done it. And I'll still say this, I don't have an interest, you know, it's like you don't always have an interest in what you do, but you learn to love the process of how, you know, your day goes. Something that early on I enjoy, you know, serving a lot of different types of people. You serve all walks of life, you know, you serve all classes of life, you know, and so you have an ability. I love talking to different people, you know, and people with different backgrounds, everything from the, you know, commercial conglomerate to the everyday Joe that just doesn't know what they need, you know? And so you have an opportunity to touch a lot of people. And I just think that that's such a cool experience, cool opportunity.
Love that.
That's awesome, man.
I think, Tay, you can underscore your statements about Nick when you talk about how quickly he went through the licensing process. That still is just, I think that's Hall of Fame material there.
And he won't tell you about it, man. He'll be like, hey man, I'm licensed. Let's celebrate. And be like, what?
Wait, what?
I didn't even know you were sitting for the test. He'd be like, hey man, I just went on this appointment. I just want to tell you about it. I'm like, dude, I thought you were going to call me before and we could prep together and we could, you know. So
I just went ahead and figured it out.
It was a stress, man.
There's a clue there. So anybody that's listening or that's aspiring to get better, there is so much to learn from watching your process, the way that you approach things. You've talked about details today, and I know details is a huge thing for you. And you could tell it. You could tell that with just even the thank you notes and what you do on a daily basis. But you know, the self-starter, the figure it out, the do more than I'm asked, the you know, I'm going to do it and then talk about it. I'm not going to talk about doing it and then go do it. There are so many things that I've learned from watching, you know, you in these first couple months that I've been just blown away, impressed. So I know, you know, it's mutual, by the way. You know, the three of us talk about it all the time. We feel extremely fortunate to have, you know, you here and wearing the same shirt together and being on the same team, and the impact that you've already had in such a short amount of time gets me geeked to get out of bed of what that looks like long term. And there's no doubt that Jupiter will be a big time hotspot on the map of Urban Young. So, and you know what we talk about all the time. You know, yes, we're in the insurance business, but man, we're in the people business. Man, we're in the culture business. You know, we talk about all the time. I call it the culture economy, and there's something attractive about just doing the right thing. There's something attractive about making an impact and pouring into people. And we get the opportunity here to pour into people and teach life, just like Coach Pete, right? Football was his utility, but that was his platform to teach life.
Built for life.
And built for life. And I feel like that's what we're doing here, to be able to teach and be able to learn ourselves about just concepts, philosophies, components, and attributes of the way that you approach things, of just life, and how to squeeze more juice out of this thing, and to have somebody who believes the same thing, and just that wasn't something you came in and learned from us. You already had it. Like, you know, I'm taking notes from you. So, you know, to know that we're, you know, because think about it, 10 years ago it was just the three of us sitting around saying, hey, we think this thing is how we want to go. Let's just put our heads down. And now to be 10 years deep, and, you know, for you to say those compliments about, hey, this is why I chose this place. And it has nothing to do with insurance. It has to do with the components that all three of us care so much about. Man, it's a dream come true. So I just share those same feelings to know that, you know, this is why it's fun.
Yeah.
This is why it's fun.
I think something you pointed out too, though, Brett, that's cool is you talked about business as your sport, right? And you think to yourself, if you're a business owner, then you probably seem like you're pretty alone, right? If you're the business owner and you have employees, it's like, I've got this identity where I'm the guy, and then I have my folks and my people and however you want to refer to it. But what's fun here, and what I continue to find super fulfilling, is the fact that we make business a team sport.
Yeah.
Right.
Ooh,
whether it be other entrepreneurs that join, or whether it be key leaders that are invited to come along on this journey, we put ourselves kind of all on the same level. And I think that makes it a little bit more fun when you realize you're not alone, right? You're here with people because you've chosen that's who you want to work with. Yeah. And that's the most important driver before anything else. I just think being able to bring a team element, for me, which is a new kind of deal, right? I've had the team element in business, but it's a whole nother level here at Urban Young. And I echo Brett's comments. Super two-way street there. But I hear you talk about the sport, and I just think, man, that's powerful. But then bring the team game to a sport that can be a pretty lonely place. Yeah. And I think you got a winner.
That's such a good point. I mean, like, that is one of the most lonely things. Like, the entrepreneurial road can be so lonely, and that's why people join masterminds and all these different groups and all these different things, because they're clinging to try to find people that have the same mindsets and that can collaborate together. Yeah. But to know that, and that's still important. I still do that today, and I know you guys do too, right? Mm-hmm. There's influences outside of this network, but to know that I get to come to work every day and be around people who literally shove me into being better. I have no choice but to be better today than I was yesterday. I mean, that should make you a little nervous and excite you a lot. And you're right. That is a good point. How do you take this lonely road and make it a team game? And I think this is the early birth of that philosophy, which is super cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll tell you, to transition to team game, when when are we getting on the boat next? No, I did want to. I want you to talk. I want you to talk a little bit about Jupe life. What is this hashtag? You know, now.
I mean, is Jupiter is it cool?
It's pretty awesome, man. Yeah, it's great. So I think it's different for everybody. Also, I think you have to be there to experience it. You guys have all experienced it. I think if we went around the table, everyone would have their different spin on what it is. It doesn't take long to soak in the environment that Jupiter has. It all starts with the people, I think. You know, it's really cool. It's very pretty. There's some cool restaurants, some big, nice houses, but the people that are there really drive the culture of Jupiter, you know, and what the community has to offer. It's, you know, I best explain it if you've ever been to anywhere in the Caribbean, you know, Jamaica, St. Lucia, the Bahamas. The people there want you so badly to experience their place, and they want to share it with you because it's so great, because it's so beautiful. Not from a pompous, hey, where we live is great, but man, we just want to share it with you because it's so awesome. We want you to love it too. You know, we want you to have a place to come to as well. And that's the biggest thing that I've experienced is when I go to other places, I'm like, this is kind of how people are, you know, back home. And it's really cool to live in a place where the community is like that. You know, and we've talked about this kind of off air before in the past. Huge on small businesses. People in the community love to support the community. People there love to see, you know, people within thrive, and they have their way of keeping it just the way it is and not allowing certain things in. And kind of on the culture standpoint, I think we talked about, you know, every little bit you let in, there's a possibility that it hinders that a little bit. But, man, it's such a rich place in just the community of people, in the lifestyle, the speed of it. It's my wife Taylor and I love it there. We will never leave if we don't have to. And we feel like there's so much more that we can squeeze out of that place, you know. And we've been there just a short while, but we hope to never have to go anywhere else.
I think about you as a representative of Jupiter, if you will, and to the Jupers out there, man. You constantly have good showings on behalf of Jupiter. You don't ever leave a detail out when we come down and visit, and we've definitely felt your love for Jupiter, and it's infectious. So.
It's easy, man. They make it easy.
I'll tell you, 90% of the time we're down there, we're on the water. So
don't ever change that.
What's wrong with the other 10? What are we doing?
I know. Yeah, exactly. We're sleeping.
What in the world?
No, but it's funny. Nick, we went down, and it was the day you closed on your business, and we're making this transition. It's fun, excitement. Last minute, we popped down there, and you know, we're wrapping up at the bank or signing paperwork and stuff. And he's like, you know, we're thinking we're just going to go grab lunch. And he's like, hey, man, you know, why don't we just take the boat to lunch? And, of course, all of us, oh, yeah, absolutely, man, we're in. So we go meet up over the boat. Of course, we get on the boat, and the tight cooler packed. He's clearly, this wasn't an option. This was the plan.
Oh, it's dialed in. There's hats.
You never know.
Got hats.
Yeah, he's got hats, you know, the whole thing. And, you know, we cheers and celebrate. And then about 5 minutes into the boat ride, we're in the channel, and he's like, I know at some point, you know, when you come down here like on a business trip, we're not going to go on the boat every time. And I was like, man, I sure hope we do go on the boat every time. So hopefully that trend continues because there is something to it, the environment, the way you feel. That's Jupe life to me, is the way you feel when you leave there and when you're there.
To Jupe life, man.
Absolutely. To Jupe life.
Happy to share it.
Well, Nick, man, thank you so much for coming up.
Anytime. Yeah, appreciate this.
Always a pleasure. You know, these conversations are always rich. It's kind of fun to get on air and be able to talk about it. But, you know, whether it's on air or off air, it's always a privilege.
Stay tuned.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, I appreciate
it.
as
well.
If you guys enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe. And if you have not, please check Nick Patti out on the socials. Hit us up. Follow Urban Young. As always, we appreciate you guys. Life is meant to be extraordinary. Take care.